The kiss of dawn's first light saw the camp erupt into life. Grots ran to their nominal positions and posts, more like a thunderous charge than any orderly deployment. All had the warmth of a good day before them, for today was their first flying under their new colours, the banners of Cronin de Cunnin. A boss of little repute up until recently, Kronan was unifying the tribes of Aquilonia the only way it could ever be done, with success, by action, with victory. Cronin de Cunnin had exploded onto the scene of Aquilonia like a thunderbolt. It was said he was touched by the gods, that he was a disciple of the great prophet Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka himself, and he espoused something that had been in too little supply recently: Cunnin. So it was that Kronan had risen and all before him had fallen. Humies, any war boss or nob who'd challenged him, and even the Space Marines. And it was in this feat, this superlative display of not only brutality, which was, of course, the Orky way, but also of Cunnin, which was also the Orky way, or at least it should have been. Their mighty gods, the only ones that truly counted, of course, Gork and Mork, were the gods of brutal Cunnin and Cunnin brutality. Hence Cunnin was meant to be a way of life, a path set down by the gods themselves. Yet somehow it had always been the brutality that most emphasized up to this point. But now, finally, Cunnin had come to Aquilonia in the manifestation of this mighty war boss, Kronan. It was only weeks before that he had 3 other war bosses bend the knee, as the humans would say, to that mighty lord, and he took the increased forces under his command and went to work. For the first time ever, the greenskins of Aquilonia had tasted the heady intoxicant of victory over the mighty Space Marines. But more, he had taken a Humi city, then another, and another. And with each victory, more and more Ork tribes flocked to his banner, and with each new tribe, new forces, then new victories were garnered. Like a snowball that builds to an avalanche, the Orks were gathering impetus, momentum, power unto power, as was the Orky way, the way of the Wa. Their tribe was absorbed into the greater Wa, which, coincidentally, was exactly the same time as when the previous boss's head had rolled onto the floor of the audience chamber of Kronan de Cunnin. It seemed Cronin had not been privy to the same worldview and manifest destiny as their war boss had, so the dissonance had been resolved the most expeditious way possible. In a fight. A fight that was marked only as being as brutal as it was swift. The head of Blood-Brow Bone Gnawer had bounced thrice before being smashed under the foot of that mighty and cunning war boss, Kronan, and all was accord once more. But now, Cronin had multiple squadrons of Flyboys under his command, and, to the exultation and joy of his said squadrons, he intended to put them to immediate use. Thus it was that the Grots sped around the wide landing field, their gurneys of missiles and bombs positively spilling over in their rush to get the vehicles ready for the Flyboys' arrival. Of course, the stapling of many of the Grots into some of the larger Flyers had been a trial, but it had been done with efficient speed, for today was a day to remember. The runt herd's apoplectic bellowing had only just finished the preparations, when the huge doors of Dub Barracks slammed open and the Flyboys processed out. At their head, Daka von Smashhoven, the best Flyboy for 100 years, easily led the Flyboys in their charge towards their awaiting craft. Each battered any Grots out of the way, then jumped into their Flyers, slapping any Grots inside their vessels for good measure. One always needs to let them know the hierarchical situation, of course. The Grot support outside then grabbed onto propellers and cranked them. And off into the skies they leapt, like a very angry swarm of wasps. As the 100 or so Flyboys flew over the armies of Cronan, they now went from horizon to horizon. All heard the bellows and hoots of approval from below, with only one of the Flyers being knocked out of the skies by the encouraging shooter salutes. Thus did the Flyboys of Dr. von Smashhoven's own winds of war speed towards the enemy lines. They knew, and eagerly anticipated, the arrival of their Hume counterparts who had caused such trouble over the last few days. It was almost unfathomable to the winds of war why their previous boss had not permitted their being at least loaned to Kronan before, for they had been in the midst of a terrible lull in action, and it was known that if one does not take out one's weapon and use it on a regular basis, well, it would rust, wouldn't it? It was known. And the Humes did not disappoint. Out of the clouds above, they came, hurtling down like hawks pouncing on prey. They cut down many a flyboy in their first pass, but were in for a very large shock when they came up to hide amidst the clouds once again. For Dr. von Smashhoven had been in close parley with Kronan, and was deep in his counsel, whatever that meant. So it was that Cunnin had been gifted to von Smashhoven, like some funny disease, but a good one it seemed, for it had worked. For as the Humes in their thunderbolts climbed back up to be met by a wall of Daka, as Smashhoven and more than half of his flyboys dipped out of the clouds from above, and fell on them in turn. The previous wave of flyboys, giving chase from below, caused a perfect storm for the Hume plains. A storm of Daka. Daka to the left of them, Daka to the right of them. They got killed, almost immediately. Von Smashhoven himself flew over the lines of Orks thrice to indicate their utter victory, before banking up to join his boys as they crisscrossed the skies above the Hume lines and killed with impunity. So confident were the Humes in their pilot's superiority that nary a single anti-aircraft vehicle or emplacement did they prepare, much to their lament. And thus did Kronan stride to the very front of his mighty army, his war, and bellow that one word to the heavens. With it, the entire horde moved as one, and charged the now shuddering and horrified Hume lines. Today was a good day to be an Ork, for with the cunning bit out of the way, the brutality ran like a river. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future. And today, we are to discuss one of the many units of the Greenskins, the Orks. And what a set of units to begin with, but the Flyboys. Those mad Orks of the cult of speed, where anything on land and with the inertia dampening effect of wheels on ground is simply too constraining. For these are the Ork pilots of the grim darkness, the air wing of the Greenskin Hordes. Now, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote Flyboys, "It takes a special kind of Ork to strap himself into the pilot's seat of a ramshackle aircraft and hurtle into aerial combat, namely, a bonkers one." Renowned as frothing loons even amongst the speed freaks, these Ork aces scream through the skies at breathtaking velocities, and will cheerfully approach any target head-on, no matter how massive or dangerous. Darker jets. Streaking into battle through war-scorched skies, a Dakajet's thruster leaves an oily contrail of black smoke in its wake, while the plane's huge wing-mounted supershooters spit hails of bullets at the foe. Though not as nimble as the aircraft of other races, Dakajets are capable of an incredible turn of speed that makes them fearsome dogfighters. It also helps that Orks fly like complete lunatics, taking risks that Imperial pirates would see as pure insanity. Dakajet pilots are great believers in quantity over quality. As such, they ensure the mechs strap every gun available to the fuselage of their aircraft. In the heat of battle, while corkscrewing madly through formations of enemy aircraft, the Flyboys cut loose with their full arsenal. They maintain that long, uncontrolled bursts are the best way to ensure the target goes down in a blazing ruin. Some Dakajet pilots have even been known to smash out their cockpit glass with the butts of their sluggers in order to add their own pistol fire to the barrage. This can have unforeseen and spectacular consequences for the pilots when attempted during void warfare. Ducker jets fill the dual strategic niches of air-to-air dogfighters and air-to-ground assault craft, not least because their whooping pilots attack every target in sight with maniacal abandon. Armoured columns and infantry formations alike find themselves raked with furious firestorms as the Ducker jets hurtle low overhead, while enemy pilots feel panic building as jostling swarms of these ramshackle greenskin aircraft race towards them, with absolutely no consideration for their own survival. Of particular note is the fearsome flying Edbutt, favoured amongst the most deranged flyboys, who, unable to resist getting stuck in at point-blank range, simply crank their throttles and soar headlong into their victims, bellowing "Wah!" all the way. Needless to say, the impact of several dozen tons of scrap metal, jet fuel and munitions moving at breakneck speed is enough to decapitate even an Imperial Titan on a good day, and a single such kamikaze maneuver has, on occasion, turned the course of an entire war. Blitzer bombers. Even on their best day, the average Ork Flyboy has little patience for trajectories, payload arcs, and all the other boring bits involved in high-altitude bombing. Blitzer bomber pilots instead ensure that their massive, unsubtle boom bombs land more or less on target by simply dropping them from point-blank range. A Blitzer bomber pilot will throw their aircraft into a screaming nosedive, their terrified grot crewman pulling the bomb release lever at the last possible moment. After a loud crank and some alarming juddering, the payload plunges downwards and explodes with a thunderous bang. Meanwhile, with his bombs away, the cackling flyboy, hopefully, pulls up. Such manoeuvres do not always end well, and most grots have to be forcibly nailed into their bombardiers' nests to avoid them bailing out before takeoff. That said, when a boom bomb does score a direct hit, the resultant carnage is more than worth the risks. These humongous explosives reduce fortifications to blazing rubble, turn tanks into craters, and generally rip enormous holes in the enemy lines for the foot-slogging orcs to pour through. Burner bombers. Burner bombers are an inevitable byproduct of the orcs' love for speed, fire, and the desire to combine these things while killing something. Strapped with as many incendiary bombs and rockets as is physically feasible, burner bombers streak low over the battlefield, raining conflagrant death upon enemy infantry. The wild-eyed burner boy pilots of these craft like to watch their targets burn up close and crispy. As such, they regularly return to base with their vehicles' undercarriage streaked with gore and scorch marks. Burner bombers sometimes carry scorcher missiles, fire-and-forget armaments that render them even more deadly. These corkscrew warheads make a mockery of fortifications, exploding in pyrotechnic showers that drive their victims from cover, or else cook them alive within defences turned into death traps. WASBomb blaster jets. When the blocky silhouettes of the WASBomb blaster jets fill the skies, any sane enemy knows to run for cover. Custom-built airborne death machines bristling with humming force fields and crackling madcap weaponry, WASBomb blaster jets are ferociously shooty and surprisingly resilient to incoming fire. They are built by demented mech-boy pilots who, fed up with seeing the Flyboys having all the fun, build all the best scrap and cunning inventions into their own personal aircraft. WASBomb pilots compete to see whose personalized creation can blow up the most targets the fastest, and in the most hilarious, spectacular of ways. The mechs thoroughly enjoy such contests, for not only are they entertaining, but every successful kill ensures more scrap to be looted at the battle's end. The experience is somewhat less entertaining for the enemy, of course, who find themselves subjected to aerial bombardment by a bewildering array of lethal weaponry. Custom mega cannons spit searing streams of raw energy into the foe, blasting them to atoms, while underslung smasher guns snatch up their targets in localized force fields and squash them like a grot's skull under a runt herd's boot. Some blaster jets mount teleport mega blasters, whose shimmering beams grab their victims and hurl them through the warp to either rematerialize high in the air, fatally emerge inside solid objects, or be torn apart and distributed liberally over a wide area. Meanwhile, return fire rattles from the blaster jet's thick armor, or rebounds from the wobbly force field bubbles they project. Famous Flyboys. From one end of the galaxy to the other, deranged Ork Flyboys hurtle into battle with the sole intent of creating as much high-speed carnage as they can. Many fly solo, giving themselves overblown names such as Captain Killwings, the Black Baron, or Fly Boss Dakafrag, in order to strike terror into their enemies and impress their peers. Others form entire squadrons of ace Flyboys and set out on sortie after madcap sortie, their legends growing with each retelling. Amongst the most infamous of these aerial murder mobs is the Death Squadron, led by Flyboy Commander Uzgob. The Death Squadron is one of the most iconic formations of Ork Flyboys in recent memory, surviving dozens of sorties in the bloody war between Warboss Bad Thug and Grimlug. Uzgob's aerial loons have been responsible for the deployment of the Gantbuster bomb in Scrap Valley, the sinking of Warboss Grimlug's battleship, the imaginatively named Grimlug, and the aerial deployment of over 5,000 angry squigs into Grimlug's main encampment. There are many other famed squadrons, of course. The Death Skull Aces, known as the Blue Bombers, have been the terror of friend and foe alike above the jungles of Armageddon for 3 years now. Their Blitzer bomber wings screaming down to scrape the canopy with every suicidal attack run. Mablag's Fire Skull Fliers are a band of gun-happy Evil Sons pilots whose aerial races have been known to literally set the skies above Riza on fire for miles in every direction. Meanwhile, the Imperial Knights of Quinellen II learned to fear the short-lived but deadly Goth Flyboys known simply as the Nutters, whose repeated flying headbutts took a shocking toll on the ancient war engines of that world. End quote. The Flyboys. Truly hilarious stuff, as with most Ork units and lore, if one does not ever consider exactly how horrifyingly effective these comedic vehicles can be. For the Orks are so goal-directed, so deliciously berserk that they will, as we have heard, even kamikaze into a target rather than allow it to dominate their hordes. Now that is the kind of conviction that makes the stuff of nightmares for any logical beings. It is with mad abandon that they bomb, duck a dive bomb, and even headbutt their enemies, all for the victory of the war. Without constraint or restraint, this is the way of the war. The collected onward rush of the hordes of the Greenskins. And it is both hilarious on the board and lethal in the lore. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to the Flyboys of the Orks. If so, then do please consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then also hit the notification bell button thing, as I would not want you to miss out. As it is indeed Orktober, there should be more Greenskin videos on the way, and I hope you will join us all here as they drop. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make time for fun. Toodaloo.